Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of Leadership Ready Room Chats. I am Brandon Jenkins, here with my co-host, Tom Brother Murray. And today's topic is about baseball. No, just kidding. But we had a really good baseball metaphor for the topic today, and that is when you are on a team and you're in a leadership position, and at 1 minute, you are expected to act like the owner. You're in big strategic conversations. You are talking about things like purpose and vision for the overall organization and trying to set the North Star and the direction that the team needs to head. And then in the next minute, maybe you're in a really tactical situation where you're expected to get in there and actually just execute a specific function in the organization, whether maybe that's sales, maybe you're in a sales conversation or business development conversation, something like that, where at 1 minute you're big up in the clouds, or not up in the clouds, but you're just thinking strategically, you're thinking big picture, long term. And the next minute you're actually just in a conversation where kind of the next thing you say could influence the direction of that conversation, something very tactical. And I think this shows up in all types of organizations, all teams of all different sizes. It was really resonating with me and Tom yesterday as small business owners or solopreneurs or entrepreneurs with just a few people, where you really are wearing a whole bunch of different hats. So the whole baseball thing, though, I'm going to let Tom talk about that. You don't need to go straight there, Tom, if you don't want to, but I think we definitely need to bring that up sometime during this episode.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. I mean, I'll lead with that. So it was very top of mind for me yesterday. I'm a Padres fan, San Diego Padres, and they're struggling a bit at the moment, and notably so is the team captain, Manny Machado. And I had just gotten done listening to a bit about it on the radio, which is why it was top of mind. So he's the leader among the players. He is a future Hall of Famer. He's put together a career already that will get him to Cooperstown, and he's still playing. He's also hitting his batting average today. It's June 10th, 2026. His batting average is the worst in Major League Baseball. And the radio piece that I was listening to talked about the fact that he's got a lot of weight on his shoulders. He's supposed to be helping lead this team. He's supposed to be putting up big numbers at the plate. And there is so much data. There are statistics upon statistics. If you watch baseball even a little bit, it's all stats all the time. And at a certain point, none of that other stuff matters. When he steps into the batter's box, the fact that the opposing pitcher is likely to start him off with an off-speed pitch or a high heater or whatever is completely, or the fact that Manny's only got a certain OPS or batting average. None of that matters, because in the moment, he just needs to hit the ball. And that's the strategic versus tactical stuff. Eventually, when it's time to execute, we have to put away some of the strategic discussion and just execute. And for somebody in a leadership position, you might wind up straddling the fence a little bit, maybe sometimes uncomfortably so, or having to switch back and forth between roles. And so that's how we got on this topic originally yesterday. And we realized that we and probably other leaders out there are also at times struggling with having to carry both jobs at the same time, trying to be the owner and the player, the leader and the executor. And if we don't know when to turn on and off those different skill sets or attributes or ways of doing business, maybe we'll wind up freezing at the plate and not swinging at that pitch that we should have. And not having the clean execution that we're hoping for. So that's how we got here. And, there is a weight to carrying both roles, regardless of whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you are in the corporate world, in government, in the military. just about everybody out there does at times have the weight of both of these roles. Anybody that's in a leadership position, certainly. Um, you can be responsible for outcomes at a macro level, and also your bat may impact those outcomes from the tactical perspective, and it's hard. So I'll stop there. Now that I've laid that out, Brandon, what's kind of top of mind for you?
Well, man, I can't believe we didn't touch on this yesterday, brother. Helicopters, naval aviation. When you are the CO, this is exactly the situation when you're the CO, because you are in charge of the direction of that command. You have the responsibility of that. Everything that command does, it comes back to you. You're the one accountable for it. And at the same time, we got our annual flight hours to meet. We're flying missions. We're leading missions. We're going out and doing our annual check rides in that aircraft. And when we're in the cockpit, we're not expected to be in the cockpit thinking about the 5-year vision for where the command needs to be. We are in the cockpit to execute the mission of that day. And a whole bunch of planning went into it on the front side. And I think this is a really good segue, right? Like a whole bunch of planning goes in on the front side, and discussions with people at all different types of levels. At command level, you're pretty much tactical, but maybe you're having conversations in the operational realm, right? And so you're helping to plan out, like, what is this squadron's role going to be in this overall plan, right? And but when it comes to game day, when you jump in the cockpit and go flying, you need to know what that mission is, your role in that mission, and you just need to go execute that. And I can't, we didn't even touch on that yesterday, which is funny because, for the listener out there, Tom and I are both 22-year naval helicopter pilots. And so the fact that didn't come up is interesting. But yeah, I think it's completely in line. So that's what just came up for me. I was listening to you talk about Manny Machado and baseball and getting in the batter's box, and I'm like, man, we go through this in naval aviation in the cockpit when we are the CEO of the command essentially, and then we're also still players, man. We're still flying that aircraft, and people still expect us to be very proficient at flying that aircraft, even though we have all this other owner type stuff going on at the same time. I don't know. I'll pause there. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
Well, first of all, just a quick point of pride. I was never in danger of not meeting flight hour mins. I always was at the top of the flight hour list, regardless of rank or position. So,
Nice.
just in case somebody out there is listening and throwing shade. Yeah, the analogy is so on the nose. I think for the leader, one of the things that I think you can do to help your team, because everybody's a leader at some level. And so one of the things that is important, I think, for your team is to give them some boundaries, some decision authority, clarity on objectives, right? And this kind of ties into so many other things we've talked about. In the Navy, we use the term CCIRs, Commander's Critical Information Reports. The things that the leader, one echelon up, needs to know, or when they need to know, or how they need to know, based on the severity or the criticality of whatever is going on. And that can apply more broadly with this idea of boundaries and decision authority. Hey, you that works for me, here's your left and right limits. Here's your swim lane. You can decide anything in there. When things, get outside, you need my permission for X, Y, and Z. Or if A, B, or C happens, I need to know within 24 hours or a week, whatever the case may be. And I think the most effective leaders out there are not just paying lip service to this concept, but really holding their team to it. And when you have a subordinate that comes to you and says, what should I do? Hey, I already gave you the decision matrix for that. Just execute, right? Because if you undercut your own messaging, you're just going to reinforce this teammate coming back to you again and again and again. So put the boundaries in place, stick to them. Of course, give guidance, provide support and training and mentorship. And then let your folks go do the work. Let them step into the batter's box. And so I think that's one of the most important aspects of this idea of maybe having to straddle the fence a little bit. Well, take something off your plate. Trust your team, empower your team. And yeah, I'll stop there and flip it back to you, Brandon, if you've got something. Otherwise, maybe we can pivot to, a little more comparison of tactical versus strategic.
Yeah, well, real quick, what came up for me just now is this idea that knowing when to not step back in and be the player when you are in that leadership role. And this is really tough for leaders who are shifting into a new leadership arena, maybe leading a small team to now leading a large organization, or maybe you were an individual contributor, now you're leading a team. This is one of the things that I see tripping up new leaders. And speaking to myself here, when I was brand new in these leadership roles, is kind of stepping back and knowing when it is actually your turn to be the player and be in the game, and when maybe you got to put a pinch hitter in because actually your mind does need to stay kind of where the owner's mind should be staying at the moment. And so maybe you need a pinch hitter. Maybe it's not your time to jump into the batter's box. And if you have that kind of decision-making authority and you have the ability to do that, then learning to discern when it is time to not be a player, it kind of gives your other teammates a chance. That's one of the most important skills, I think, to develop when you're shifting into that kind of a leadership arena. So really great points. And then it's like, okay, how do we put these requirements, these operating procedures, the standards in place so that there's some left and right limits so that your teammates know when it's time to come get you. And when they know, all right, we don't have to get Jenks right now. We know our limits and he expects us to go play the game. Yeah, huge, super important, Tom. And then you mentioned wanting to shift. So what were you thinking? The shifting to more tactical versus ownership. What are you thinking?
Well, I think we're already there. We're talking about this idea of knowing when to shift back and forth, right? I think your segue is brilliant. Um, the most mature leaders do understand when it's time to, exactly like you said, call for the pinch hitter, to zoom out and focus on a different aspect, perhaps. The other thing we covered a lot of ground yesterday, but so much of this is interrelated. We talked about kids and summertime and this idea of, hey, kids are out of school, there's less structure. And I was feeling pressure to make sure that my kids were eating well during the day. They're running amok. They're having a blast. They're not running amok. They're having a blast with friends, running all over town. But I'm not convinced they're eating anything. I'm not convinced they have sunscreen on. And I feel like there's not enough structure. Well, maybe that's okay for a little bit. Maybe as long as they've got enough sunscreen on and a snack or two, it's going to be okay. And so, just understanding when each of those levers can be pulled differently or should be pulled differently, or when we need these things in different quantities. That's the hard part. That's the leadership stuff, right? Whether we're talking kids or baseball or business, it's all interrelated. So yeah, this like tactical versus strategic, knowing when to zoom out. It's hard, very, very hard. So yeah, that's where I was going to go, Brandon. Um, and I think, really, unless you are in almost any organization, regardless of size, I think leaders still need to at least have a finger on the pulse of the tactical, right? At a certain point, if, go back to naval aviation, the head of naval aviation is a 3-star admiral. The head of naval aviation is not going to be called upon to actually get back in the cockpit and go fly a combat sortie. That's not that person's role. That's not the best use of that person's time. And so, the MLB commissioner is never going to step into the batter's box to try to win a game. However, the head of naval aviation, that 3-star admiral, does need to be close enough to the tactical world to be able to have context about what's going on, to be able to relate to the issues that the enterprise is experiencing, and in order to best carry out the strategic work that person is called on to do. And so, I would challenge you out there if you're saying, my business is big enough, my company's large enough, I don't need tactical. I disagree. I think you need to be close enough to it to have that context and to be able to most effectively do your job. So I'll stop there because I don't want to take us in too many different directions at once.
Yeah, what I just heard there, or what resonated with me most there, was the awareness. So the higher up you go with leadership responsibilities, you do get further and further away from actually being the player in the game real time. And at the same time, you still need to be aware of what all your players are being called to do, right? Not necessarily tell them exactly how to do it, but just be aware of what your players are being called to do. And like you said, then that builds your awareness, so that when you're thinking bigger picture in the direction of the organization, you actually have some kind of idea of what we can actually execute, right? Because you may have the grandest vision in the world in the direction you want to travel, but you need to be aware of the limitations at every level, in your organization. So that's what came up for me, man. I don't know if this is too soon to jump here or not, but something else we were talking about is, uh, oh yeah, so the structure, sometimes you're in an organization or on a team where there's lots of structure there. You, maybe you're a middle leader, middle manager or something, and you have an idea of what the organizational mission is. There's a lot of structure there. And so you can kind of, when to play, like when you have to be looking at overall vision, big picture, and when you're supposed to kind of jump in and be the player. And yeah, you're still learning that along the way. You're learning how to discern it, but you kind of have a good idea. There's going to be situations when you shift into a new arena where there's not that structure in place already. And I think then that is going to amplify. And specifically, Tom, what you and I were talking about yesterday was we made that shift from a huge organization like the Navy, naval aviation, into kind of building our own businesses. And so all this stuff we're talking about is kind of like amplified when you are trying to build something where you might have a lot of teammates on your team. And so then the question becomes, and I'll throw this your way, Tom, what is the value in a situation like that of the leader being able to kind of shift mindset when necessary between owner and player?
I mean, I think it's critically important, Brandon, and it's also, for me, it's hard. I'm doing it every day. Um, I know you're doing it every day as well. It's hard because I see the importance of remaining at the strategic level, of putting plans in place, of focusing on last quarter's P&L or last month's P&L to understand where I maybe need to tighten up expenses. That's important work. That will affect the long-term, viability of my business. But also, there's a client intake that's going to occur at 10 o'clock, and I'm the only person that can do it. Very tactical. If I don't do that, do we lose the client? If so, does that mean we're missing out on $20,000 or $30,000 in revenue? So I need to work on May's P&L. This is real happening today. I need to work on May's P&L. And as soon as we get off this call, I'm doing a client intake instead. So it's hard. And I think, the best folks in positions like ours are able to jump back and forth seamlessly. But, for me, it's one of the hardest things of my day to day candidly. And it probably drives most of the stress that I feel day to day. So I don't know if I'm actually answering your question, and I'll acknowledge that it's important. So I'll stop there and see if I touched on your question, or if you want to throw it back at me.
No, absolutely, man. When you are trying to build a business and you're the only person, you're every role on the team. And specifically, we were kind of talking about me yesterday, and it was almost a little bit of an epiphany when we started talking about this. In fact, I think we were talking about how one minute you are trying to build a business, a brand, you want to, so I want to empower leaders, right? I want to empower my teammates. That's I really feel that as a part of my purpose, right? Empowering the people I care about who are sitting across the table from me, who are on my teams. And one way to do that, in a way that I really have found that I love, and it's one of the most effective ways to do it, is to coach. And so as a player, I'm a coach. And so when I'm sitting across the table from you, or the Zoom world or whatever, and we're in a coaching relationship, I'm in the game. My only job is to coach you. Well, when I'm outside of that, and the rest of the days when I'm not coaching, then it's like, oh, okay, well, the business has marketing and the business has accounting, and we've got, sales and advertising, all these things. Of course, sales, advertising, marketing, it's all kind of mashed up in there. And so all of a sudden you find yourself, okay, when I'm in those roles, not only am I responsible for all that, I'm also, some of those roles might not fit with my natural strengths, with my unique purpose, as much as when I'm sitting with you and I'm coaching you. We specifically got into like the sales conversation, and when it's time to like ask for a fee, right? You want to work with me? All right, here's the fee to work with me. And how that's so difficult sometimes for some people, myself included. That's really tough for me. And I think that's when you brought up Manny Machado, and we got into the baseball analogy. And it was like, hey, he's a Hall of Fame caliber baseball player, and he's got the worst batting average. When he gets up to the plate, be a batter, be a hitter, do whatever that situation calls for: sack, fly, bunt, hit, whatever it calls for. That's the only thing that he needs to be focusing on. And then it was like, well, what if Manny Machado was the owner and the GM, right? And so I think, but what really was the epiphany for me was shifting to this idea that um, we can, outside of the context of a call, it's like you go through and you plan, and you're like, yeah, I think this is a good advertiser. This is a good price to set for services. Boom, boom, boom. And then when you get in the call and you're in the game and you're in the batter's box, you just execute. And if if you strike out, you strike out. If you hit a home run, you hit a home run. And then after that, you're going to go back and you're going to watch the tape. Dude, sports is such a good analogy for this. You're going to go back then and watch the tape, or you're going to read the transcript, or you're going to reflect on what happened. And you're going to learn some things from that. And then you're going to course correct at a higher level. And then when it's time to get back in the game, you're going to get back in the game and execute based off of those lessons you learned. But when you're in the game, you're just executing. So, I guess let me kind of bring that back and just, I guess, pause there. I feel like I'm going on a little bit of a rant, but that was really for me like the energy that really fired me up yesterday when we were having this conversation.
I mean, that's the same place I was going to take it, Brandon. Um, it can be exhausting, right? Trying to fulfill these roles simultaneously, or bouncing back and forth between them constantly. Trying to evaluate strategy while also executing, and then judging yourself for not doing the other one well while you're in the middle of one of them. Carrying the whole organization while you're standing in the batter's box. And so, yeah, it is a lot. This speaks to the speed of scaling. It speaks to having a good team around you. And it speaks to the fact that we all need to spend at least a little time in each of these roles, regardless of the level at which we're operating. Um, I think the, the the leadership maturity piece is being able to be all in on one when you're doing it. To be I'll take it back to baseball, and then I'll let you, get the final shot here. The leadership maturity is if you're Manny Machado, when you're in the box, all of that other stuff becomes noise. The statistics, the contract, the fact that your hitting is the worst in MLB, that is noise that you just have to let go of and swing the baseball bat. And then maybe when you go back to the clubhouse after the game, now we can talk strategy. Now we can pull some stats. Now we can, whatever the case may be. But again, the mature leader knows when to separate those things.
Man, dude, here's another episode. And that is, how do we be more present and more focused on the task at hand as leaders when we have a billion other things trying to get our attention? That is a whole nother episode, man. But you hit it right on the head. You hit a home run with that one, brother. To keep with the baseball analogy here. Yeah. The move is, you are going to have to switch between different roles in your organization. And the maturity, the sign of maturity, the place you want to try to get to, I think, is developing that ability to be present and focused on the task at hand, on the role at hand, on the role you're expected to be in the moment. Play it. Because if you're trying to be the owner while you're in the batter's box facing a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, it's going to be real tough to hit it. It's going to be real tough to hit it when that is the exact next thing that you need to do for the good of your organization. So, man, I couldn't have ended on a better principle for leaders to take home, and that is being present in the moment in whatever role that you're supposed to be playing, right? So there were two big ones here. The discernment to understand your role and when it's time to be a player, when it's maybe time to not be a player, and just let your other players have their moment. And then being able to focus on your role in the moment and be in that role, be present with it. Dude, that was a good way to end it. So with that, I want to thank everybody who tuned in live, who tuned in after the fact. You're watching this after the fact. If any of this resonated, Tom and I are both available. Please reach out to us. We'd love to continue the conversation with you. And we can't wait to see you again next time on Leadership Ready Room Chats.